Some families don't have real careers to share with us, class. Mr. Mitchell said it to a room full of laughing 9-year-olds, tweed jacket, pressed red grading pen already uncapped on his desk. Noah's hands stayed folded in his lap. The drawing stayed flat on the desk in front of him. 5 crooked sides, a courtyard sketched in the center, the Pentagon his father walked into every single morning of his life. The teacher never once asked why a scholarship student's emergency contact line routed straight to a secure satellite number instead of a house. He just kept laughing along with the wealthy kids near the window, basking in it, certain nothing in this building could ever touch him. He had exactly 4 minutes left to find out how wrong he was.
Wrong move. The arrogant teacher misjudges the quiet boy's background completely. Let me tell you what happened.
Noah stood at the edge of the parking lot and the morning light caught the crumpled drawing in his hands. He smoothed the paper against his knee again and again until the creases softened. The Pentagon's 5 sides stared back at him, slightly crooked, drawn in pencil and colored in careful, uneven crayon strokes. He had worked on it for 3 nights. Inside a secure war room 7 miles from the school, General Richard Coleman signed the final page of a federal oversight order. His pen moved fast, precise, final. An aide waited by the door, holding a black folder against his chest. Coleman stood. He did not speak. He walked toward the waiting SUV with the same quiet certainty he brought to every room he entered. Bennett Elite Academy rose ahead of Noah like a wall of glass and marble, cold even under the sun. Polished floors stretched the length of the entrance hall, reflecting chandeliers that hung from a ceiling 3 stories high. Luxury cars idled along the curb. Drivers in black suits opened doors for children half their size. Noah walked past all of it, his shoes scuffed at the toes, his backpack frayed along one strap. A group of students near the entrance glanced at him, then at each other. They did not bother to lower their voices. "That's the scholarship kid," one of them said loud enough to carry. Another laughed short and sharp and turned away as if the conversation had already ended. Noah did not look at them. He kept walking, his drawing pressed flat against his chest, his eyes fixed on the hallway ahead. Steady steps, even breath. In for 4 counts, hold for 4, out for 4. His father had taught him that years ago, back when Noah was small enough to sit on his shoulders during base parades. "Breathe through it," his father had said. "Let the noise pass through you. Don't hold on to any of it." Miss Sarah stood near the doorway of classroom 4B, clipboard against her chest, watching him approach. She offered a small smile, the kind that wavered at the edges. Noah nodded once. He stepped past her into the room, and the smell hit him first: fresh polish, expensive cologne, the particular sterility of wealth that never seemed to touch anything real. Desks sat in neat rows, each one occupied by a child in a uniform that fit too well to be anything but tailored. Backpacks bore designer logos. A boy near the window was already bragging about his father's hedge fund, his voice pitched for the whole room to hear. Noah found his seat near the back, quiet, alone, and set his drawing down with care. The general's motorcade pulled out of the Pentagon's south gate. 4 black SUVs, engines low, moved in formation through the checkpoint. Inside the lead vehicle, Coleman opened his phone and checked the time. School started at 8. He had told Noah he would try to make it for career day, no promises, only an attempt. The general did not make promises he could not keep. He had built his entire life on that single rule. Back in classroom 4B, the morning announcements ended and Mr. Mitchell entered with his usual stride. Tweed jacket, buttoned posture, straight chin, lifted just enough to look down the length of his nose at the room. He surveyed the desks. He smiled at the wealthy students. His eyes passed over Noah without pausing, the way a man's eyes pass over furniture he has no interest in. "Settle down," Mr. Mitchell said. "Today is career day. I expect each of you to make this school proud." He let his gaze sweep the room once more, lingering on the boy by the window, the one with the hedge fund father. Approval, recognition. A small nod that meant something only to those born into rooms like this one. Noah sat with his hands folded over the drawing, the paper warm from his palms. He did not fidget. He did not look around. He had learned long ago that stillness drew less attention than movement, that silence gave people less to mock. Around him, the wealthy children whispered compared notes, practiced the polished lines their parents had likely written for them the night before. Noah had written his own words. He had drawn his own picture alone at the kitchen table under a single bulb that flickered when the wind picked up outside. Miss Sarah moved along the back wall, marking attendance, her pen hovering a moment too long over Noah's name. She glanced toward him. She looked away, her clipboard pressed tighter against her chest fingers, whitening at the edges. She had seen the emergency contact field on his file before the secure line listed where a home number should have been. She had not asked questions. She had learned in this building that questions about scholarship students rarely earned answers worth hearing. Outside, the motorcade slowed as it merged onto the parkway leading toward the school district. Coleman watched the city pass through the tinted window jaw, set mind already elsewhere, already running through the schedule of the day. A briefing at noon. A signature needed by 3. And somewhere in between, a classroom full of 9-year-olds waiting to talk about what their parents did for a living. He thought about Noah's drawing, the one his son had shown him 2 nights ago, hunched over the kitchen table with a box of crayons borrowed from a neighbor. Crooked lines, careful shading, a 5-sided building drawn from memory because Noah had never actually seen the inside of the Pentagon, only the gates, only the long drive in, only his father's silhouette disappearing through the checkpoint each morning. Coleman had told him it was good. He had meant it. Inside classroom 4B. The first presentations began. A girl described her mother's seat on a corporate board, her voice rehearsed, her hands gesturing the way television anchors gestured. Mr. Mitchell applauded, genuine, warm, generous with his praise. Another student spoke about a family law firm 3 generations deep, framed degrees lining the hallway of their estate. Mr. Mitchell nodded along, leaning forward, fully present. Noah waited his turn near the back of the room, his drawing flat against the desk, his breathing slow and even. He thought of his father's voice, calm and low, the way it always was before something difficult. "Hold steady," his father had told him once. The ones who shout the loudest are usually the ones with the least to lose. Noah did not understand it fully at 9 years old. He only knew that it felt true sitting here surrounded by noise that had nothing behind it but money. The clock above the whiteboard read 8:14. Outside, 4 black SUVs merged onto the final stretch of road leading toward Bennett Elite Academy, still miles away, still invisible from the classroom window. Mr. Mitchell glanced at his list, found the next name, and looked up. His eyes found Noah at last. He did not know yet what that drawing meant. He did not know whose son sat in front of him, hands folded, eyes steady, waiting. He only saw a scholarship kid with a piece of crumpled paper and a silence he mistook completely for nothing at all. Mr. Mitchell called Noah's name, and the room shifted, chairs creaking as students turned to look. Noah rose from his seat, drawing pressed flat against his chest, and walked to the front of the classroom with measured steps. He did not rush. He did not hesitate. He simply walked the way his father had taught him to walk into any room, shoulders square, eyes forward, breath even. "Class," Mr. Mitchell said, his voice carrying the practiced warmth he reserved for students whose families wrote checks to the building fund. "Let's hear what we have next." He turned toward Noah, and the warmth drained from his face the moment his eyes landed on the crumpled paper. A flicker of distaste crossed his features, quick, controlled, but unmistakable to anyone watching closely. Miss Sarah was watching closely. She stood near the back wall clipboard, trembling slightly against her chest, her eyes moving between Noah and the teacher with the kind of dread that builds slowly, then all at once. She had seen this look before. She knew what usually followed it. Noah held up the drawing, smoothing the creases with his thumb. The pencil lines were faint in places, the crayon shading uneven, but the shape was unmistakable. 5 sides. A courtyard at the center. tiny windows drawn one by one, each a small rectangle of careful, patient effort. "This is the Pentagon," Noah said. His voice was steady, quiet-pitched, just loud enough to reach the back row. "My dad works there. He helps protect the country." A ripple of laughter moved through the room before Mr. Mitchell even opened his mouth. The boy near the window, the one with the hedge fund father, snorted loudly enough to draw a few approving glances from the students around him. Mr. Mitchell did not silence the laughter. He let it breathe. He let it grow. "Protects the country," Mr. Mitchell repeated, and the words came out slow, deliberate, soaked in something close to amusement. He stepped closer to Noah, hands clasped behind his back, chin tilted down at an angle meant to remind everyone in the room exactly who held the power here. "That's quite a claim for a scholarship student." Noah said nothing. He stood with the drawing held at chest height, his grip steady, his face unreadable. Around him the room had gone half silent, the kind of silence that waits, that wants something to happen. Mr. Mitchell turned to address the class, his voice lifting into the register he used for important lessons, the ones meant to be remembered. "Now here is something valuable for all of you to understand," he said. "Some families have real careers to share. Lawyers, surgeons, CEOs, builders of things that matter." He paused, letting the silence stretch, letting his next words land with full weight. "And some families unfortunately don't have much of anything to offer at all." The laughter returned louder, this time sharper. A girl in the front row covered her mouth, eyes bright, with the particular cruelty children learn quickly when cruelty is rewarded. Noah's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only crack in an otherwise perfect stillness. He did not lower the drawing. He did not look away. Miss Sarah's pen slipped from her clipboard and clattered against the floor. She bent to retrieve it, her hands unsteady, her face pale beneath the fluorescent lights. She glanced up at Noah for half a second, an apology she could not voice, and then looked down again, biting the inside of her cheek until she tasted copper. "Sit down," Mr. Mitchell said to Noah, waving a dismissive hand toward the back of the room. "We don't have time for fairy tales today." He turned to the next student on his list, already moving on, already forgetting that a 9-year-old still stood frozen at the front of the classroom, drawing in hand, dignity hanging by a thread. Noah did not sit. Not immediately. He stood for one more breath, 2, 3. His eyes fixed somewhere past the teacher's shoulder, past the window, past the parking lot beyond it. Somewhere out there, 4 black SUVs were closing the distance between the Pentagon and Bennett Elite Academy, though no one in this room knew it yet. Noah knew it. He held on to that knowledge the way other children held on to stuffed animals, quietly, privately, a small and steady comfort against the noise. He returned to his seat. He set the drawing down on his desk, smoothing it flat with both palms, careful, deliberate, the way someone handles something they intend to protect. The boy near the window leaned over to whisper something to his neighbor, and both of them laughed again, glancing back at Noah with the easy cruelty of children who had never once been told no. Mr. Mitchell moved through the rest of the presentations with renewed enthusiasm, his praise growing more lavish with each student, his smile widening, his hands gesturing broadly as though the morning had only improved. He complimented a girl's PowerPoint slides. He asked a boy detailed questions about his father's law firm, nodding along with genuine interest. The contrast was not lost on anyone in the room, least of all Noah. Miss Sarah remained near the back wall, her clipboard now still against her chest, her eyes fixed on a spot on the floor. She thought of the emergency contact field on Noah's enrollment file, the secure line listed in place of a home number, the small red flag she had noticed months ago and never once mentioned aloud. She thought of all the ways silence could feel like betrayal, even when it wore the mask of simply staying quiet. Outside the motorcade reached the final intersection before the school engines humming low tires gripping the turn with practiced precision. Inside the lead vehicle, General Coleman checked his watch again, 9 minutes, perhaps less. He thought of his son's careful crayon lines, the patient shading along each side of the building. the quiet pride in Noah's voice when he had first shown his father the finished drawing 2 nights before. Back in. The bell for second period rang, and Mr. Mitchell did not dismiss the class. He stood instead at the front of the room. His eyes returned to Noah's desk. "Wait," he said, "we're not finished here." Noah looked up. He kept his hands folded. He said nothing. Mr. Mitchell crossed the room slowly. His shoes clicked against polished tile. Each step deliberate, each step louder than it needed to be. "Your story bothers me," he said. "A scholarship student, claiming his father protects the country." He stopped beside Noah's desk. "That's a very specific lie to tell." "It's not a lie," Noah said. The room went still. 30 pairs of eyes shifted between teacher and student. Miss Sarah's hand tightened on her clipboard. "Excuse me," Mr. Mitchell's voice dropped low. "My father is a general," Noah said. "He works at the Pentagon." "I'm not lying." Laughter broke out near the window. Mr. Mitchell did not laugh. His jaw set hard, his eyes narrowing into something colder than amusement. "A general," he repeated. "Of course he is." He reached down and snatched the drawing off the desk before Noah could pull it back. "Let's examine this masterpiece more closely, shall we?" He held it up to the class, turning it slowly, his lip curling at the crooked pencil lines, the uneven crayon shading along the building's 5 sides. Some students snickered. Others simply watched, sensing something shifting in the air, something darker than ordinary mockery. "This," Mr. Mitchell said, "is what a pathological liar produces when he wants attention he hasn't earned." He looked directly at Noah now, no longer performing for the room, his voice low and sharp. "You think this is funny, insulting the intelligence of every student in this building." "I'm not lying," Noah said again, quieter this time, but no less steady. Something in Mr. Mitchell's face changed. A muscle in his cheek twitched. His grip on the paper tightened. He tore it. One motion. Clean down the center. The sound cut through the room like a slap-sharp final impossible to take back. Gone. Just like that. 2 halves drifting toward the floor. Noah did not cry out. He did not flinch outwardly. He simply watched the pieces fall, his chest rising once sharply, the only sign that anything inside him had cracked at all. Miss Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. She took a step forward, then stopped herself, frozen between instinct and fear. Her eyes filling with tears, she refused to let fall in front of the class. "That's enough disruption for one morning," Mr. Mitchell said, dropping the torn halves onto the floor as if they were nothing, as if they had never mattered at all. Noah slid out of his chair. He knelt down. He gathered the pieces one at a time, his fingers careful, his movements slow, deliberate, the silence around him thick enough to choke on. Not anger, not tears, just silence, weaponized, controlled. A few students whispered. Most said nothing, watching the scene unfold with the particular discomfort of children who sense an adult has crossed a line, even if they cannot name it. "Pick those up and sit down," Mr. Mitchell said, already turning away, already dismissing the moment as though it had cost him nothing. Noah stood, the torn halves clutched against his chest, his eyes fixed on the floor, his jaw tight. Miss Sarah watched him return to his seat, and something in her chest twisted painfully, a knot of guilt that would not loosen no matter how many times she told herself she had no choice. She looked away. She always looked away. Mr. Mitchell straightened his jacket, smoothing the lapels with both hands, the signature gesture he performed whenever he believed he had won something. He glanced at the clock, then at Noah, his expression hardening into something final. "This behavior cannot continue," he said loud enough for the whole class to hear. "Lying about a parent's career, disrupting an entire lesson with fantasy. This goes to the principal." He crossed the room again faster this time and gripped Noah's arm just above the elbow, fingers closing tight enough to leave a mark. Noah did not pull away. He did not struggle. He simply rose, torn paper still pressed against his chest with his free hand, his face a careful, practiced blank. Miss Sarah's breath caught audibly. She took another half step forward, clipboard slipping in her grip, words rising in her throat and dying there before they reached her mouth. She wanted to speak. She wanted to say his name, to say stop, to say something, anything that might break the spell of her own fear. She said nothing. Mr. Mitchell pulled Noah toward the door, his grip unyielding, his stride brisk and certain. The classroom watched in silence, some students smirking, others suddenly uncomfortable, shifting in their seats as the teacher dragged a 9-year-old boy out into the hallway, like evidence in a trial already decided. At the doorway, Noah glanced back once, not at Mr. Mitchell, not at the laughing students. He looked at Miss Sarah just for a moment, his eyes steady, holding none of the accusation she expected, and all of the disappointment she had earned. Then he was gone, pulled into the hallway, the door swinging shut behind them with a heavy final click. Miss Sarah stood alone at the back of the room, clipboard pressed to her chest, tears finally spilling silently down her face. She thought of the torn drawing, the careful crayon lines now creased and broken in Noah's small hands. She thought of the emergency contact field she had never questioned, the secure line she had dismissed as a clerical curiosity months ago. She thought of all the moments she could have spoken and hadn't, stacking quietly on top of each other until they became something she could no longer carry without flinching. Outside in the parking lot beyond the classroom window, 4 black SUVs turned through the front gates of Bennett Elite Academy, engines humming low, completely unnoticed by anyone still inside the building. The convoy moved with quiet, unhurried precision toward the administrative wing, carrying a passenger who had no idea, not yet exactly what his son had just endured 1 floor below.
Absolutely not. He actually rips up a 9-year-old's drawing in front of an entire classroom of laughing kids. If that were me, I would have lost my mind right there on the spot. Imagine being in that room and doing absolutely nothing to stop an adult from attacking a child. The sheer audacity.
Mr. Mitchell gripped Noah's arm and pulled him into the hallway. His fingers dug into the boy's sleeve hard enough to leave a mark. Noah did not resist. He did not speak. The hallway stretched ahead of them. Marble floors gleaming under recessed lights. Portraits of past headmasters lined the walls, gold frames catching the morning sun. Noah's sneakers squeaked against the polish with every forced step. "You'll learn respect today," Mr. Mitchell muttered more to himself than to Noah. His grip tightened at the corner near the administrative wing. He shoved the boy through the heavy oak door without knocking. Principal Bennett looked up from his desk, irritation flickering across his face before settling into practiced authority. His office smelled of leather and cologne, expensive, deliberate, designed to intimidate. A wall of degrees hung behind him, each one framed in gold. "What is it?" Mitchell Bennett asked, setting down his pen. "This boy," Mr. Mitchell said, releasing Noah's arm with a small shove, "disrupted my entire class, made wild claims about his father. I want him expelled. Today." Bennett's eyes moved to Noah, slow, assessing the look of a man calculating risk rather than considering truth. He reached into his desk drawer and produced a stack of forms, crisp, official, already half filled with the school's letterhead. "Scholarship students," Bennett said, shaking his head as he uncapped his pen. "We extend opportunity, and this is the gratitude we receive." He spoke as though Noah were not standing 3 feet away, as though the boy's silence made him invisible. Miss Sarah appeared in the doorway, breathless, her clipboard pressed against her chest. She had followed them down the hall, unable to stop herself, unable to fully arrive either. She hovered at the threshold, neither in nor out. "Sir," she started, voice thin. "I don't think—" "Not now, Sarah," Bennett said, not looking up. He clicked his pen. The sound was small, almost nothing, and yet it filled the room like a verdict already rendered. Noah stood in the center of the office, torn paper still clutched in one fist. He did not sit in the chair offered to him. He did not sign anything. He stood spine straight, breath even the way his father stood in rooms far more dangerous than this one. "Sign here to acknowledge the charges." Bennett said, sliding the paper across the desk toward Noah. Lying, disruption, disrespect toward a faculty member. Noah did not move. Sign it, Mr. Mitchell snapped, stepping closer, his shadow falling across the desk. Noah looked at the paper. He looked at the red pen resting beside it, sharp and waiting. He said nothing. Bennett sighed, the sound of a man already bored with the inconvenience of a child's resistance. Fine, he said. We'll process it without his signature. The outcome remains the same. He pulled the form toward himself and began writing, his red pen moving in quick, decisive strokes across the page. Each word landed like a small verdict. Expulsion, effective immediately, cause fabrication and insubordination. Miss Sarah's hands trembled at her sides. She watched the pen move, watched the ink dry into something permanent, and felt the full weight of her silence settle into her chest like a stone she could not set down. Outside the large window behind Bennett's desk, something shifted at the edge of the school's front gates. A black shape, low and fast, cut across the gravel drive. Then another. Then two more moving in tight formation engines, silent to anyone not paying attention. No one in the office noticed. Bennett's pen continued its careful work, looping through the final signature line with practiced flourish. Mr. Mitchell straightened his jacket, satisfied, already composing the story he would tell at lunch. Noah stood motionless, eyes fixed on a point past the window, past the gates, past everything. This room believed it controlled. The first SUV reached the circular drive and slowed without stopping. A second followed close behind, tires crunching, gravel engine humming low and steady. Bennett's pen hovered above the final line of the expulsion, form ink pooling slightly at the tip. Miss Sarah's eyes flicked toward the window. She saw the black shapes now, 4 of them arranged with a precision that had nothing to do with parent drop-off lines or delivery trucks. Her breath caught somewhere between her throat and her chest. "Sir," she said again, louder this time, "there's something outside." Bennett did not look up. "In a moment, Sarah." His pen touched the paper. The vehicles came to a full stop at the base of the front steps, doors opening in near-perfect unison. Figures emerged, dressed in dark uniforms, moving with the kind of coordinated purpose that belonged nowhere near an elementary school career day. Noah's eyes did not widen. His breathing did not change. Somewhere deep inside the careful stillness he had maintained all morning, a single thread of certainty pulled taut. Bennett's signature began to form, the first letter curving across the page, his expulsion of a 9-year-old boy now 3/4 complete. He did not see the men crossing the front lawn. He did not hear the heavy front doors of the academy swing open below, or the sound of footsteps, many of them moving with unmistakable authority across the marble entrance hall. He pressed his pen down for the final stroke, eyes fixed on his own handwriting, utterly blind to the storm now climbing the stairs toward his office door. Bennett's pen completed the final stroke of his signature. The office door exploded inward, wood splintered, hinges screamed. The heavy oak door that had stood as a symbol of Bennett's authority for 11 years swung open so hard it cracked against the wall, sending a framed degree crashing to the floor. Bennett froze, pen still in hand, ink bleeding slightly into the paper where his fingers had gone rigid. Mr. Mitchell spun toward the doorway, indignation already forming on his face. "This is a private—" He stopped. 2 military police officers stepped through the broken frame first, dressed in crisp uniforms, sidearms holstered but visible. Their posture radiating a discipline that made the office's leather and gold suddenly look small, almost childish. More followed behind them, fanning out along the walls with practiced precision. "What is the meaning of this?" Mr. Mitchell demanded, though his voice had lost its earlier certainty. He took a step forward, chest puffed, still clinging to the authority he had wielded all morning like a weapon. "Do you have any idea who I am?" No one answered him. Miss Sarah pressed herself against the wall near the doorway clipboard, forgotten somewhere on the floor, her hands flat against the cool plaster, as if she needed something solid to hold on to. Her eyes moved from the officers to Noah, and something inside her chest cracked open, slow and complete. He was telling the truth. Noah stood in the center of the room, torn drawings still clutched in one fist. He did not flinch at the broken door. He did not flinch at the uniforms filling the small office. Something in his posture shifted instead, subtle, almost imperceptible, his shoulders settling back into a line that no longer belonged to a frightened 9-year-old. Mr. Mitchell turned toward him, confusion flickering across his face for the first time all morning. Then the general stepped through the doorway. 4 stars gleamed on each shoulder, catching the office light. His dress uniform sat perfectly pressed, every line sharp, every metal precisely aligned, a visual record of 3 decades spent earning each one. He filled the doorway the way storms fill a horizon, not with size alone, but with the weight of everything he represented. He did not look at Mr. Mitchell. He did not look at Bennett. He looked at Noah. "Dad." The single word left Noah's mouth quiet, almost private, meant for no one else in the room, but everyone heard it. The silence that followed had texture. It pressed against the walls. It pressed against Bennett's half-signed expulsion form, against Mr. Mitchell's open mouth, against Miss Sarah's trembling hands. General Richard Coleman crossed the room in 4 measured steps. He knelt briefly in front of his son, taking in the torn paper still clutched in Noah's fist, the faint red marks on his arm where Mr. Mitchell's grip had landed earlier. Something moved behind the general's eyes, contained the kind of fury that had learned long ago never to show itself as anything other than calm. He stood. He turned to face Mr. Mitchell. "You grabbed my son." Not a question. A statement delivered flat, almost gentle, which made it worse. Mr. Mitchell's mouth opened. Nothing came out at first. "Sir, there was a misunderstanding." The boy made claims that seemed... "He told the truth," Coleman said. "You called him a liar." Bennett rose slowly from behind his desk, the half-signed expulsion form still beneath his trembling hand. "General, I assure you the Academy values every student." "Sit down," Coleman said. Bennett sat. Coleman reached into the leather binder tucked beneath his arm and set it on the desk with a quiet, deliberate weight. He did not open it yet. He simply let it sit there, dense with implication, while Bennett's eyes fixed on the federal seal embossed across its cover. "Do either of you know who funds this Academy's federal grant program?" Coleman asked. His voice remained level, almost conversational, which somehow made the question land harder than shouting ever could have. Neither man answered. $50 million, Coleman said. "Renewed annually contingent on compliance with federal oversight standards." He let the number sit in the air for a moment. "I sign that renewal." Mr. Mitchell's face drained of color in stages, first his cheeks, then his lips, until he stood pale and rigid against the wall. All his earlier swagger evaporated into the recycled air of the office. Bennett's hand drifted toward the expulsion form as if he might somehow hide it beneath a stack of other papers, make it disappear before anyone noticed what he had nearly finished signing. "Leave it," Coleman said without raising his voice. Bennett's hand stopped. Noah moved closer to his father's side, the torn drawing still in his grip. He did not say anything else. He did not need to. His silence had carried him this far, and now it stood beside him like a second witness patient, unshaken, finally vindicated. Miss Sarah found her voice at last, small, cracked, barely above a whisper. "General Coleman," she said, "I'm so sorry." "I should have said something. I should have stopped this." Coleman turned to look at her, and something in his expression softened just slightly. Recognition of the fear that had kept her silent all morning. "You're saying something now," he said. "That matters." She nodded, eyes, wet hands finally still at her sides. Mr. Mitchell found his voice again, desperate now, the performance of authority replaced entirely by the scramble of self-preservation. "General, please, if I had known who the boy's father was, I never would have—" "That's the problem," Coleman said, cutting him off without heat, without raising his voice even slightly. "You shouldn't have needed to know." The words landed harder than any shout could have. Mr. Mitchell's mouth closed. He looked for the first time all day like a man who understood exactly how much trouble he stood in, though he did not yet understand the full shape of it. Coleman placed a hand on Noah's shoulder, steady grounding the same weight that had anchored the boy through countless difficult mornings before this one. He glanced down at the torn drawing still clutched in his son's fist. "We'll fix that," he said quietly. Later. Outside the shattered doorway, more officers waited in the hall, patient, silent, professional. Word had already begun to spread through the building, whispered from classroom to classroom, that something had happened in the principal's office, that black vehicles had arrived, that a general himself now stood inside Bennett Elite Academy. Bennett stared at the leather binder still resting on his desk, federal seal gleaming under the office lights, and understood with sudden and total clarity that whatever came next would not be a conversation, it would be a verdict. General Coleman opened the leather binder. The pages inside bore the federal seal at the top of each sheet, dense with clauses, dense with the particular language of power written down and made permanent. He did not read from them aloud. He simply turned them one by one, letting the sound of each page fill the silence. Bennett and Mr. Mitchell had no words left to break. "Effective immediately," Coleman said. "Federal oversight assumes direct control of this academy's funding structure." He set the binder down, facing Bennett, the relevant clause already circled in black ink. "Your grant is revoked." Bennett's hands gripped the edge of his desk. "General, surely we can discuss." "There's nothing to discuss," Coleman said. "You signed an expulsion order for a 9-year-old based on a lie you never bothered to verify. That decision is documented. That decision is dated. That decision is yours." Mr. Mitchell stepped forward, his composure long gone, his voice climbing into something close to begging. "Please," he said. "It was a misunderstanding. I have a family. I have a mortgage. This was never about the boy. It was about maintaining order in my classroom." "You tore up a child's drawing," Coleman said. The room went still. "In front of his classmates," Coleman continued. "Then you grabbed his arm and dragged him down the hall." He paused, letting each fact settle into the air like sediment. "There's a word for that." "It isn't misunderstanding." Mr. Mitchell's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Noah stood beside his father, the torn drawing still in his grip. He raised it slightly, not as a gesture, not as theater, but simply because it belonged in the room now the way a piece of evidence belongs in a courtroom. Two halves torn straight down the center. The 5-sided building split exactly where Mr. Mitchell's hands had ripped it apart. Miss Sarah crossed the room and knelt beside Noah. She reached out, slow, careful, and took the torn pieces from his hand with a gentleness the morning had not earned. "May I?" she asked. Noah nodded. She held the two halves together, aligning the jagged edges as best she could, the crooked pentagon whole again in outline, if not in substance. Her eyes filled finally openly, no longer something to hide behind a clipboard. "I should have stopped this the moment it started," she said to no one and everyone at once. Coleman turned to the military police stationed along the wall. "Escort Mr. Mitchell from the property," he said. "His employment with this institution is terminated effective this hour. Notify the State Board of Education. His certification will require formal review." Two officers stepped forward. Mr. Mitchell stumbled back, color draining from his face entirely, now his earlier swagger nothing but ash. "You can't do this," he said, though even he seemed to hear how hollow the words sounded. "I already did," Coleman said. The officers took his arms not roughly, but firmly, the same firmness he had once used on a 9-year-old boy who never raised his voice once. Mr. Mitchell did not resist. He could not. There was nothing left in him to resist with. He was walked from the office down the marble hallway, past the portraits of headmasters who had built this institution on exactly the kind of arrogance that had just ended his career. Bennett remained seated, hands folded, now the posture of a man waiting for a sentence he already knew was coming. "As for you," Coleman said, "your termination is effective immediately as well. Federal oversight will appoint an interim administrator within the week. Full investigation into the Academy's admissions practices, disciplinary patterns, and treatment of scholarship students begins today." Bennett did not argue. He simply nodded the gesture, small and final, a man surrendering to math he could not dispute. Noah watched it all from beside his father, quiet, composed, the same stillness that had carried him through every painful hour of the morning. He did not smile. He did not gloat. He simply stood and let the silence that had once been used against him become something else entirely, something earned, something that Finn...
Fiction. But that feeling? A father's absolute vengeance. I get chills every time. I see racist bullies put in their place. How would you have handled Mr. Mitchell? Comment below. Like, share, subscribe.